Thank you, Ashley. Good morning, all. I'm Elsie Arntzen, the State Superintendent. And I can see I have 125 participants at this point, and I know more will probably be joining us at this time. Our purpose with this conference is to assist you in a very uncertain time where assessment and accountability need to be somehow equated, even in a COVID cloud. So at the state, what we're looking at this point is to see how it is that we can help have meaningful assessments, to know that there is accountability, that there is learning taking place in our classrooms, whatever those classrooms look like and whoever we are teaching. We've been working very hard and diligent for you in proceeding for a waiver from the federal government, from the Department of Education. And it's not a waiver of accountability, but it's a waiver of this state mandated test that we have at the very end. And there are some interesting opportunities that you have throughout your day, today and tomorrow, to ask questions of us in how we are proceeding to make sure that we're supporting you. And more importantly, supporting our students, whoever they are, wherever they might be. So I wish you all the best. I'm going to be celebrating this new year all the way till December 31st, because I have hope. I have hope that we're going to be out of this COVID cloud, that we are going to be back into more of a traditional mode of giving education and having learning taking place. But with that as well, let's look at the flexibilities that we have learned. Let's understand that we now are in a remote world, and that we can still communicate, that there are still positives that can still happen. So with that, I wish you all the best. We have great opportunities for you. Please take away, ask questions of us. We are here to serve you. In all, stay well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Arntzen. Yes, we just want to thank everybody for making the time to join us today for the next 2 days virtually. We know we don't have the opportunity to connect with you in person, but we're really excited for this first virtual conference with this long-standing event that we've had in place. And in fact, almost 20 years that we've been offering the annual data and assessment training each year. And looking at what we have in store for you, we've got the ASSIST conference, and you may be asking yourself, well, what really is the theme, or what are we planning for the next 2 days? And ASSIST is really designed to provide you actionable, systematic supports to inform both students and teachers, which is a key mission here at the OPI, also for assessment, especially within our teaching and learning department. This program was made possible due to our gracious presenters and their willingness to lend their expertise to the high quality professional learning that we have available to you throughout the next 2 days. As we work through this, we're going to have about 50 slides to share with you and 7 Menti questions. And what that means is you're going to be able to interact with us throughout this presentation using that Mentimeter or that survey question setup. As you may have noticed, this is a webinar format, so it's a little bit different than typical Zoom meetings. So some of the interactivity based on the volume of attendees has been reduced. With that said, if you have questions as far as how to Zoom, because you may be either new to Zoom or not as comfortable using this setup, I just wanted to briefly point out some basics so that we can all be successful in our virtual learning over the next 2 days. So the first Zoom basic that we have in place for you is your microphone, your ability to essentially come on and off mute. During our breakout sessions and other kind of setups that we have in place, it's our presenter's preference that you remain muted unless you're interacting within a session. Essentially, that's going to help us reduce background noise and disruptions during that time. Each of these breakout sessions and the keynotes will be recorded. In addition to that, the second Zoom basic that you have in store for you is that start your video, share your screen or share your image with the folks that are in this virtual session. And that allows us to create a community and a connection with you across all of the state of Montana and also with folks outside of state lines. And so we know that some of you, though, may have bandwidth issues. As you can see, I'm kind of coming in and out here, which essentially is a transfer of information challenge. So if you do find that you're having a little bit of a quality hiccup, if you will, you can also turn off your video, and that should help with the performance of your virtual experience. The third thing that we wanted to make sure everybody has in place is just making sure that your information is clearly visible with your full name. This is going to help us make sure that the information that we have for you as far as registrations for each of our sessions matches up with our session evaluations for renewal unit purposes. So in order to do that, you just click on that little panelist icon with the people there, which right now shows 160. It opens up into a window so you can see all of the names there. And then what you're going to do is you're going to actually click the More button, and you have the option to rename yourself. The fourth Zoom basic is just the chat feature. This allows you to make introductions to the group that's on the call today, and it also allows you to post questions to us or engage with your peers as you see fit. So some of the things that we have planned for this session is to walk through and welcome you to the virtual event and our conference that we have, give you some tips for how to conference, the purpose of our Montcast system, the state of affairs for assessment, critical updates for the spring, and a suite of resources that we have available for folks, as well as our efforts on the Montana Strategic Waiver process. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ashley McGrath, and I am Montana's Assessment Director. I have been with the Office of Public Instruction since 2012, and in this role a little over 2 years now. And kind of my background or where I came from before I went to the OPI, I was a high school biology teacher. And with that said, I'm really excited and honored to have this opportunity to share with you these critical updates that we have for state assessment, and also just how amazing the program is that we have assembled with the planning team. I am confident that the materials that we prepared for you are going to be relevant to you at this time during the pandemic and meet your professional learning needs. So who is registered for the conference? Who's joining us? I just wanted to, again, welcome everybody and thank you for making the time. Looking at Monday's numbers, we have over 300 attendees registered for this event. And what's really nice about this year's conference program, it's flexible, it's adaptable, it's customized so that you can join sessions as your schedule permits. And so we really appreciate you joining us and bringing and sharing with us what is going on in your neck of the woods. So to actually get a little bit more information from the 168 persons that are now assisting with us in this virtual conference setup, one of the things that we want to do is get to know you. And it's also one of the objectives that we have in place with our presenters is interactivity. So what I'm going to use in this session is a tool called Mentimeter, and it has Menti questions, and it is an online kind of questioning as we go through this presentation. And so you're actually going to use your personal device or your phone or any way that you are actually in this meeting with us. You're going to use that to submit information with the next 4 questions that I have for you. So I'm going to ask you where you're coming from, ask you the size of the district, if you are attending from a district, ask you what hat you wear in your respective school system, and if you're not in a school system, there are choices for you as well, and also primarily how your school system is conducting instructional services at the time. So again, as I mentioned, you use your device to connect to this, and it's set up at your own pace. So that means you can actually go through the slides quicker than I'm going or go slower as you need. And the questions are pretty straightforward in this round, and there are 7 questions available for you to interact with us in this webinar format. So that first question again is, where are you joining us from, your 5-digit zip code. So if you go to menti.com, you're going to input this code right there, which is 9750486. And there are no spaces set up in there. Once you input that, you're going to get these questions. You're going to see this screen, and you'll be able to give us the information for your zip code. And in real time, it'll start showing us who is in the audience today. Look at that. Another thing that I just wanted to mention, so if you have colleagues or others that you would feel would like to interact with this session, especially regarding the topic of Montana Strategic Waiver webinars, what you can do is share the link that my colleagues have just put in the chat. It'll be live for 2 days, and then it will close. Thank you for responding. The next question we have in place is regarding your school district. So all demographic information that we have included in this set of questions, one, it helps us get to know who's in the audience, but it also will be used for our statistical and reporting purposes for our application for Montana Strategic Waiver webinars. Your participation in this process will make sure we've reached a broad cross-section of stakeholders so that we have the opportunity to share with the U.S. Department of Education some of the current impacts, conditions that you're experiencing locally, so we can essentially put our best foot forward with our application effort. And again, your engagement, your submission through this survey tool really strengthens our overall effort with this. So this information, looking at demographics, we've just asked for zip code information, will help us make sure we have geographic inclusion across the state of Montana. This question will make sure that we have essentially addressed and reached all different perspectives of school size. The next question is, what is your primary school district role? For instance, a teacher, an administrator, a district testing coordinator, and other. You can definitely see there's some diverse educational hats that are getting represented in today's webinar. And the final question that I have for you in this first part of our materials is regarding how instruction primarily is being delivered to your students in your school system. So the Montana Strategic Waiver effort is really based on that premise that instruction doesn't look the same today for all Montana students as it did a year ago. So with that, getting to see what instruction looks like in your respective school system really helps us understand what is happening on the local level. Great. Well, thank you again, and just to continue to submit your information there if you didn't go through it at the pace that I was moving. Again, it is at your own pace, so you can go faster or slower than I am navigating the slides. So as far as celebrating where we're at today with the ASSIST conference, I want to help you be as successful in this virtual experience as possible. By that, I mean I'm going to share with you 5 conference resources that will help you maximize your experience. So with that, in looking at these resources, we're going to also make sure that through this process, your information supports our presenters so that they can deliver the best possible program for you. So looking at the ASSIST conference theme, we really want to make sure that we provide you with the tools to measure student achievement and the processes in order to do just that. So we're going to give you practical training and technical assistance based on a balanced suite of assessments. We're also going to give you information on test administration and data use to support you with the unique challenges as a result of the pandemic. We're going to make sure you have information on best practices to support student achievement, including the continuous improvement processes. But last but not least, we will give you just-in-time information and critical updates on assessments to plan for this spring. So with that, you can see on the slide here, we've got 3 different strands for you. And in no particular order do you have to stay within one strand. Again, the program is designed to be adaptable and flexible to your actual schedule. So if you want to bounce around strands, by all means, please take that liberty. I want to share with you about each of these strands so you have a little bit more insight as you plan your schedule. So the first strand that we have to offer is really offering sessions around that how-to, particularly around the local responsibility and roles for administering state assessments. Then the second strand that we have is on data use and making sure you have the information to support your various stakeholders with proficiency and progress needs. Then the third strand that we have is centered on implementation to support you with balanced assessment systems and continuous improvement processes locally. So we've got 2 days planned for you, and we're starting each day with a keynote. This is the first keynote delivered in this fashion. Tomorrow's keynote will actually be a panelist of 5 districts represented. So looking at day 1, day 2, you can use some of the tools that we have in alternative formats, like the at-a-glance PDF program. But as far as making sure you have everything centralized in one place, really that interactive schedule is going to be the best way to navigate directly to each session, get information on the presenters, get information on the presentation materials and resources, and also submit that session evaluation. So planning your schedule. I want to draw you to that first conference resource and how you can sign up for the sessions to help you, but also help us. So in the chat, you will have information if you've not already done this, or if you need to edit the information you've submitted before you join our breakout sessions. What you're going to do is essentially provide us with which sessions you intend to join. And this allows us to have real-time information so that we know how many OPI helpers we need to have in the room to make sure your experience is optimal. The next thing that I want to draw your attention to is the Google site and navigation on this platform. As you can see, there are a lot of ways to essentially get around on this platform. And the first thing is the overview details, where you have access to the at-a-glance, the full conference program, and everything to kind of get the big picture view of what we have to offer for you over the next 2 days. The next thing, you can connect with our help desk. If you're finding that you need some help either with Zoom features or how to submit a session evaluation or any of those kind of technical things, please use this feature, the help desk, so that we can get you support with any of your technical issues that you might encounter. As I mentioned earlier, here's your interactive schedule. So from this, you can get so much information, and it's all available at your fingertips with those links in the schedule. And the next piece is that we have the pre-session content. The pre-session content is essentially put together because in this virtual setup, we can't offer you everything. And last but not least, presenter biographies. So if you want to learn about each of our presenters a little bit more, you can find their biographies in that section. Looking at the interactive schedule, so again, you get to find all of those things you need to know about presenters, their resources, their handouts, their evaluation for renewal unit purposes, and also to submit feedback to the presenters. So you don't want to reuse the session evaluation links that are in each of the session pages, and I'll explain a little bit about that further on, because each of those links on each session page is unique to that session, so it has a unique code. The third element, so pre-session content. I referenced that, but what is it? So with our pre-session content, it's to help any new test coordinator or those who want a refresher on the how-to or 101 basics on administering state assessments and navigating these assessment roles and responsibilities. So based on the virtual composition of the conference, we needed to abbreviate it. We usually have a much fuller schedule and things to offer you to get at those how-to needs. But this year, things are a little bit different with the pandemic. So we wanted to make sure to bring forward to your attention the most critical things that you need to know about. And with that said, we also knew that some of you need that pre-session information. So we reserved that, as the slide shows, in the pre-session component piece. Another place that you're going to get those critical updates is going to be within the 5 things you must know sessions that are scheduled throughout the next 2 days. That's where you're going to get the testing alerts and information that you need to administer the assessments this spring. The fourth piece is that session evaluation and renewal unit. So I just took a screen capture of the session that you guys are all in right now. So we've got 191 folks here, and some of you may wish to submit session evaluation and feedback to me, but also you might also want to get a renewal unit from this, and this is where you're going to do that. So with the session evaluation and renewal units, there's a link there. Again, it's specific to this session, so please do not reuse those. However, if you do accidentally, we do have some safeguards in place to support you. So it's not the biggest deal, but we do want to make sure you recognize that each of these links is specific to the session. I also want to thank our presenters for making this conference possible, lending their expertise and building this robust program that we have for you. We've got 30 individuals that I can't possibly recognize each of them on an individual basis to celebrate and thank them for their contribution to making this virtual conference possible. But I wanted you to know as attendees in this session that we're indebted to their willingness to share their knowledge and time with us so that we can offer this great opportunity to you and also to let you connect with them directly. I want to celebrate too and just give a shout out to the ASSIST planning team for making this possible and spending months with us to vision and plan for this next 2 days. And also I want to give a special thank you to my assessment team for really getting together, collaborating and partnering on all of the information that we have to share with you today. So state of affairs, some of you may be joining us not just for the ASSIST conference because you want to hear where we're at with the Montana Strategic Waiver process. And so now that we've covered the bases on how to conference, I'm going to transition over to the state of affairs in Montana, specifically in regards to state assessment. So as a disclaimer, I just want to share that the information that I'm sharing today is current as of today. Things happen on a day-by-day basis, as we all know with the pandemic. And really what the information that I'm going to provide to you stems from the laws, regulation, and the OPI's policies for testing, accountability, and reporting. So first, let's talk about what is the purpose of state assessments. And so the philosophy and the requirements that are in place for state assessments stem from two important places. That's the Every Student Succeeds Act and the Administrative Rules for Montana. So looking at ESSA, or Every Student Succeeds Act, in the law, it requires that all students in public schools receive fair, equal, and significant opportunities to obtain a high-quality education and reach proficiency on state standards. Another element of these assessments is they must be aligned to the state standards. State standards clearly articulate what students must know and be able to do as far as performance expectations regarding these content areas. ESSA further requires that these assessments are accessible to all students and fair across student groups. And last but not least, providing technically sound, coherent, and timely information about the student's attainment of these state standards. Now, if we segue over into the administrative rules for Montana, what does Montana's assessments require? They also require all public schools, but also accredited non-public schools or private schools seeking accreditation. All students within accredited schools are required to participate in state assessment. And the primary purpose of state assessments is to serve learning, and they need to be structured to continuously improve teaching and learning. So how do these things all work together? ESSA, Montana, how do they work together? So this graphic illustration is really to show you the exchange of information from the U.S. Department of Education perspective, or that federal look, to the state perspective, or the OPI, then to the local education agencies or our school districts. So looking at this, we've got two different arrows, one going one way, one going the other way, and really this is to show the exchange of information and how things are allocated based on those exchanges of information. So each state must submit to the department a state plan. You may know this as Montana's ESSA state plan. And this defines the expectations for not only the state, so Montana, but also the school districts with respect to testing, accountability, and reporting provisions. The next piece here is each district must submit a district plan to the OPI in order to receive this allocation. And you might be familiar with this as our e-grant system, or how that information flows from one to the next. And last but not least, looking at just that data use and programmatic look. Assessments have various stakeholders and many data users. And many programs throughout the OPI and elsewhere rely on these student achievement data to make school determinations and allocate funding. So just as an example, I'll list some that may ring a bell to you. So Title I, Title III, special education, ESSA accountability, the state accreditation process, state reporting, federal reporting, grants like Perkins. That's just an example of some of the things that rely on these performance indicators to do their programmatic work. So looking at how this happens in Montana. We're able to meet the state and federal requirements through what is known as the Montana Comprehensive Assessment System. This MONTCAS program has 3 components to it. It has the state summative, which essentially allows us to monitor proficiency and progress over time in relation to the state's goals that are defined in that ESSA state plan. It also has the interim assessment component, which are aligned to our standards and are able to allow us to monitor student progress and intervene before it's too late based on the proficiency of those state standards. And the third component is that formative assessment, or those teacher resources. These can be used in real time to adjust instruction and to meet the learning needs of all students. So what does that assessment model look like? As you can see with this illustration, it's really trying to depict to you that relationship between standards, curriculum instruction, and assessment. From this design, you can tell that these things are inseparable from one another, and they also depend on one another. I really like the state definition in ARM of assessment because it's not prescriptive, it's comprehensive of the purposes of assessment and all the things they must do to serve us. So if you look at it in this way, assessments are really tools that are useful to us after the learning has already taken place. They help us gauge the learning and are merely serving as a reflection of that learning. With the purpose of assessment to serve learning, I think we need to further expand upon this definition to describe the purpose and needs for state assessment. So state summative assessment sums up the learning. It marks the end of the instructional sequence and at one point in time where that learning has taken place. It can also, when we think about a balanced assessment system, think of it as a continuum of strategies. We must weigh and distribute instructional decision-making through different uses of assessment so that we have the appropriate grain size, frequency to make meaningful adjustments to support student learning. We can't rely on one measure to tell the entire story of a student's growth as a learner. Put another way, it's not equal amounts of each assessment type or time, but rather it's as many different data points to guide the teaching practice. So when we think about balance, that need for balanced assessment system in Montana, it's really because these state assessments that focus on 1 year summative data points do not provide sufficient information to serve the multiple and varied uses that we require instructionally. So each has a different grain size, a use and a purpose, and a frequency so that we can yield a balanced picture of student learning. So now that we've talked through the assessment purposes and components, let's restate what a state assessment is supposed to do in another way. So here are some of the how or why of the state assessments, the things it does, by design. Ensure students have equitable access to high quality education so they can reach proficiency on state standards. It helps us monitor student learning and progress. It makes sure these students have the opportunity and the state to address and close achievement gaps. By the deliberate and intentional selection of our state assessments, we have robust purposes that we can essentially provide accurate information to the public and parents that can then support the education processes at the local and state levels. So what assessments did Montana select? Here are the 6 state assessments that we use to fulfill these educational goals. As you experience over the next 2 days, or maybe you're a veteran coordinator coming to this discussion, we use a lot of acronyms in assessment. So I've listed them here for you, the 6 state assessments, their full name and also their acronym. The top row has the math and ELA for both the general and alternate students in grades 3 through 8 and 11. The second row has the science assessments, which are administered in grades 5, 8, and 11. The ACT is used for that high school fulfillment of science. And we also have the English language proficiency assessment, also known as Access for ELS or WIDA, given in grades kindergarten through 12th grade. These collectively fulfill the federal and the state rules, which are determined by the OPI, these assessments, through the competitive bid process. So now that we have that purpose and use under our belt, we can discuss where we are with the Montana Strategic Waiver effort and what that does. So we're going to transition to where we are today. So as you have all personally experienced, we are facing unprecedented challenges right now due to the pandemic. And many of these challenges are likely to persist into the spring. We want to commend each of you. We've got 204 folks in the room today, and commend you for the efforts that you're doing individually to support and help learning as it continues throughout the school year. We know these are trying times, and we appreciate your partnership as we tackle these difficulties together. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to share with you our rationale and impetus behind the strategic waiver effort because of some validity concerns based on all of those goals that I just laid out for you. So it remains the OPI's priority to protect the health and safety of staff and students. In Montana, we know many students and families have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic, and these growing COVID impacts also raise concerns about fairness and equity in state testing. We know that given the varied instructional things that are happening on the local level across the state of Montana, it will be difficult for schools to provide standardized conditions under which all students are expected to test. In the spirit of equity and equal access for all students to receive high quality education, the OPI must ensure that the most vulnerable students are accounted for first, and also prioritize resources towards the mission of serving these students during extraordinary times. So with that explains why I shared with you our best practices, our suite of resources, looking at the balance assessment system and that vision, because these other tools may be ways to support you with resources that are more connected and closer to the classroom. So looking at this standardized condition or expectation for all state assessments to be conducted in a similar manner from one school to the next, I love this graphic because it truly shows how a child's test scores can be negatively impacted from their environment and or some of the external stressors like the pandemic that might be going on. So let's talk about this condition a little bit. So looking at one of the elements of state assessments, those purpose, those goals, is to allow us to have comparability across schools and trends over time. But if we look at this image, what students in the control group are experiencing versus students in the external group is a very different experience. And this might be similar to where we're at with the pandemic as far as the learning access and actual delivery of instruction is happening for some of our learners this year. We know also through lots of consultation with districts this year that this disruption or this variability of instruction is not true for all schools. So some of our schools have had very normal learning conditions this year, very few disruptions, meaning that in-person experience because of where they are, their locale, their unique local context and condition. And so for them, they might be able to administer state assessments in an appropriate fashion because a lot of those validity concerns or points have not been raised there. And so in that instance, when the conditions are standard and they are safe and appropriate, it does make sense for you to deliver these state assessments. But let's talk about that learning piece a little bit. So what does learning look like in your respective position? Are all schools teaching in the same way? Are all students learning in the same way? Do all systems have the same resources to support these learners and these educators? So really thinking about that variable instructional model or these different situations that each of our school has experienced this year. You know, there's not a one size fits all this year. Everybody has their own unique experience with the pandemic. So if it's not possible for the OPI or schools to plan on a standard delivery of state assessments, that is one of the reasons that we are putting forth this waiver application effort to the U.S. Department of Education. So some things to think about is, what does resource or instruction look like for all students as far as, is it in-person services, is it hybrid, is it remote, what access to internet or device availability, or even just the room that they're learning in, is it quiet without disruptions? All of those things are things that we have been having conversations about this year. So if the environment or the learning conditions are safe and conducive for us to remain or have those validity points held true, then it does make sense to deliver state assessments. However, if we start to see some questioning from that validity standpoint because these things are not holding true, then what we would caution you against is making causal claims about the data from this year. So really having that disclaimer or that cautionary note, especially as school reports or results are released, because it's important, as always, especially as best practice suggests, that we do not rely on one measure or data point to tell us the entire picture of proficiency for a child. So further thinking about those validity points, another piece about our state assessments is that they are census-based. Well, what does that mean? That means all schools, all students. So are these assessments accessible to all students and fair across student groups? We know from conversations with many districts this school year that students are receiving instructionally in a primary remote setting. So for instance, let's say the district has 80% instruction services or hybrid kind of makeup, but it has 20% of students that are in remote only setups. What I want to emphasize is this year, remote only students will not have a remote proctor at-home test option. We cannot make that available this year. So back to the census point, do we have 95% confidence that we can have a representative picture of proficiency and progress in our schools regarding fair representation of all schools, all students? Further, with that adequate technical quality piece, so one of the goals of under ESSA is to have that technically sound, coherent, and timely information about students' attainment of standards. So does this end-of-year assessment do what it's designed to do? That is, measure learning over the year. I really want to go back to that piece about these are tools to serve us after the learning has taken place. I think this is a critical point because many of our schools have shared with us that they are concerned with that learning or access that these students have, those opportunity differences from one child to the next. So is this tool doing what it's designed to do? So where are we at with the Montana Strategic Waiver effort or the immediate actions we've taken in case the U.S. Department of Education does not grant us this waiver? So let me just briefly take a tour over these 4 areas: past, current, in progress, future. If it has a check mark in front of it like the past does, that means that this thing you can count on, it's already taken place. The future element does not, because it's dependent on the decision by the U.S. Department of Education. So we do not have a guarantee that our waiver application will be approved by the department. So looking at the past piece, one of the things we did was a test setting rollover for Smarter Balance, the Montana Science Assessment, and the alternate Montana Science Assessment. We also have secured a field test waiver for science, which essentially removes the accountability and reporting requirements, but it does require census participation for that waiver that was approved. Looking at currently where we're at with everything, we want to emphasize that as of today, again, back to today's date, what we know today is that these things are required by both state and federal law. So participation, that annual test, is a mandate under these provisions. Access for ELS is also underway. So that test window is open and it has been extended by 1 month. So it will close on February 26th. And we want to make sure you understand that it is not included in the Montana strategic waiver effort. So it is the expectation to plan on delivering these English language proficiency assessments to any English learners that you may have in your school system. So with that, since what we know today is that these things are required under law, we need to provide you with information to support you with this requirement and help you plan on delivering these tests this winter and spring. Where possible, we will extend test windows and provide additional flexibility to support you with the unique challenges of this school year. So additionally, what have we done to make it easier in order to do this under the conditions? We have shortened the Smarter Balance test. We have not made remote proctoring available, so no at-home testing for remote learners. We have also put in place a 1-year medical exemption for COVID reasons. And today's session, really getting your reaction and support or non-support with the Montana strategic waiver process. This is allowance that under ESSA, under Section 8401, allows a state to request to waive the law for testing, accountability, and reporting requirements. What I want to make clear is that the state and the school districts cannot act on these waivers because it does require that determination by the U.S. Department of Education. In the Section 8401 process, it does stipulate that the Secretary of Education can take up to 120 days to make a determination. However, we are optimistic that the timeline will be much abbreviated based on all of the communication that we've had about our intent with these waivers to date. So as I tore through those things, I just kind of glossed over some sections. So in the spirit of challenges and practical implications, as this keynote suggests, I wanted to give you a little bit more detail into what is that medical exemption for COVID reasons. So we are on schedule to have this reporting option available in the MontCAS application for non-participation in February. We also will have our MontCAS policies, procedures for participation in state assessments in publication in February. So it's very promising. It's under review and in draft right now. So for release within our OPI state testing page, it will be available to you in February. The 1-year specific medical exemption provides districts with some flexibility should the Montana strategic waivers not be granted by the department or not granted in time, because we recognize through all of our consultations with districts to date, there are unique situations in which it is not possible to safely deliver state assessments to students. So back to that point about no remote proctoring option, no at-home testing option this year for remote learners. So the 3 instructional strategies that we've talked about throughout today's session, or those modes of learning, are kind of recognized by traditional or in-person services, or hybrid or blended instruction, and remote only. So any students that are in a hybrid or remote only setting, it is the expectation they will be provided the opportunity to participate in state assessments by district and school on the school campus through those in-person services. However, if the child cannot participate due to COVID reasons, then that child may qualify for a medical exemption under the 1-year option that we will make available in February. So just a high-level tour of the assessment programs that I mentioned on kind of that 4 different areas of where we're at today. So first, Access for ELS 2.0 update. So this assessment window is open. It's been extended 1 month. By design, that extension also means reporting is going to be delayed because we've extended the window, so they need that additional time as well to make sure we can reconcile all things to provide results. And new this year is that exit criteria for ELS is effective in our English language learner guidance for school districts. We also have in place our COVID local monitoring tool for schools that have been selected for site visits. As you know, with the pandemic, the OPI cannot travel, and so that is our monitoring option for school districts to do that locally. Here you can see Jacob Bartow has 3 sessions listed. You can join him to learn more about Access for ELS or WIDA and serving English learners in these testing and reporting needs for this year. So those are listed there. I also have included on here, just for each of the programs that I'm going to display for you, the state standardized testing guidance. This is a resource that provides our recommendation for testing students in that in-person setting, as well as how to do that safely. And I just want to remind everyone that the test window for the Access for ELS assessment closes on February 26th. So science field test waiver. So plan on testing for general science in the alternate this spring. Although we have secured that field test waiver, again, that does not mean that participation wasn't a required element of that, but the accountability and reporting provisions were removed. So our office is currently working with our test delivery contractor to have a unique option to provide schools and districts with feedback upon the completion of the test this spring. But we don't have information on what the results of reporting will look like at this time, since it's not a requirement under SF with this granted field test waiver. The test windows for science will open in March. And looking here, we have Chris Noel sessions listed, and I just want to draw your attention to the alternate piece is actually all of our special population assessments included in one, so she actually won't be in that one, but our team will be delivering that information. But here you can learn about information on test construction, as well as where we're at, the 5 things you must know for the general science assessment, which will be delivered in grades 5 and 8 this year. And just as a reminder, the ACT is the assessment for the high school and grade 11. So ACT online and flexibility. So plan on testing this spring. Schools that were closed this fall due to COVID reasons will get the opportunity this spring to have their seniors test. There's just a handful, so it's not applicable to all, but if you were one of those schools that were closed, shelter in place, etc., just reach out to our office so we can provide you with information to support you with that spring option for seniors. Juniors will have 3 test dates to participate in the ACT this spring. And based on our district consultation from this fall, ACT has granted an emergency option for COVID reasons that we can activate should the need arise. I want to thank the ACT team for also offering office hours at the end of today and the end of tomorrow during our last networking time, so you can bring your program-specific questions to them. Listed here is Marcy Fortner's information. You can join her in the Office of Commissioner of Higher Education team and the ACT to learn more about what is going on in the land of ACT and college access. Smarter balance adjustments. So plan on smarter balance this spring. And thinking about where we are at, I have listed here just that reminder on the test setting rollover and update, but I also want to point out some adjustments that were made to make this test shorter. So our first effort this school year was to make the logistical burden less for school personnel so that they could deliver interim assessments as soon as possible this fall. In order to do that, we rolled over the test settings, which are the accommodations and student supports in the TIDE system for students that had this information included last spring. So what was in there last spring was rolled over to this fall. I mention this, I emphasize this because it's critical that schools verify this information for any student that has the support listed before administering state assessments this spring. In addition, we've adjusted the Smarter Balance Blueprint. So what that means is, historically speaking, the average student testing time was between 6 and 8 hours, and we have narrowed that down to 3 to 4 hours to help preserve instructional time with your students this school year. However, that choice has been something that we've had in the works for a while as far as thinking about minimizing the length of the assessment, especially the summative assessment, because we want to fully embrace the balanced assessment system, that suite of resources through our complete package that the OPI has made available. There are some trade-offs for shortening the assessment, so incorporating these various tools allows you to have a more complete picture of student proficiency and progress, as opposed to just having that state summative alone. Shown here is some information on Dwayne Schlavah's sessions. However, I want to really point out that he does not just have 2 sessions listed here. He actually has many more sessions, and he's partnered with our standards and instruction team so that we can share information with you from that instructional perspective, that best practice perspective, on using these tools to support both the educator and the student with the learning needs. So just looking here briefly on the remaining sessions that we have available, a shout out to the presenters that I didn't have an opportunity to highlight in just this brief little tour. Here are some things you might expect to see or take advantage of in Strand 1, the how-to, in Strand 2, the data use, and in Strand 3, the implementation. You may find it challenged to engage all sessions because you can't be in 3 places at once. However, I just want to remind everybody that these sessions are recorded and will be made available to you at a future date. And looking at this, as far as highlighting these sessions, you can see we have a lot of resources available to support you with your student assessment and your continuous improvement processes at the local level. So here, meaningful, timely participation, this consultation effort, I'm wrapping up that Montana strategic waiver process and information and what we had to share with you as far as the critical updates for state assessments. It's important, I want to emphasize, that we need to hear from all perspectives in regards to this waiver application. So it's not only required that we conduct meaningful, timely consultation with a list of stakeholders displayed on this slide, but it's also because we're partners in education together. So the right-hand image on your screen shows stakeholders as the biggest group. It's from your experiences locally, the context conditions that you are dealing with right now, that we will take that message and essentially convey this information to the U.S. Department of Education so that they will consider and spend some time seriously taking into account the application that we put forward. So I just want to really make sure you guys recognize that it's not just a checkbox here, that your participation in this process is imperative to our ultimate application success. So looking at the numbers, here's what we have for the public comment survey that we have specifically in place for the Montana strategic waivers. For those of you who have already completed, thank you. Your voice does matter. And for those of you who have not yet had the opportunity to complete the survey, we have that in the chat for you so you can take that and complete it by end of today. Today is the close of our public comment. It's been open 36 days. At the end of today, we will close this so that we can assemble all of the evidence to support the waiver application. We will submit it to the U.S. Department of Education on February 5th. So as of the 26th, we only had 94 responses, but we know there's a much larger cross-section of stakeholders that still can submit information, specifically from special populations group. We would love to hear all the way from the student to the state leader perspective, your support or your preferences for this school year. So the next question as I wind down is to engage your support with the testing waiver itself. So it will be presented in 3 different choices. So do you support the strategic waiver to cancel the state testing requirement for this spring? And we've got 212 folks on here. So if you just joined us or you didn't quite catch the Menti information, if you just take the device, how you're connected to the session right now, you go to menti.com, you use this code 9750486, no spaces, you can engage in this survey tool. And it's again helpful for us to make sure we've had adequate outreach and also that we're conveying your message to the Department of Education. This is can be completed at your own place. So if you're just logging on or getting started here, I can move to the next page and you can actually complete this. And also included in that information about this survey will be open for 2 days. So if you want to share it out, you're welcome to do so as well. The next question, do you support the strategic waiver to suspend the accountability for this academic year? And then here, looking at the third and final question that we have for you, do you support the strategic waiver to remove certain reporting elements from this academic year? Excellent. Thank you guys so much for submitting your response. And it's still open, so please keep engaging in the survey. All right, just winding down then, that's what I have to share with you on critical updates for state assessments and where we're at with the Montana Strategic Waiver process. Transitioning now to kind of wrap up, we will continue to foster a community of practice by offering 2 network times throughout the day as listed on the slide. We also will have those office hours available for the ACT team to answer any questions that you have specific to that program. For renewal units, so you're joining this session, you're an educator like me, you need to keep up on those things. You also want to give me some feedback on how today's virtual first keynote went. What I'd like you to do is go to this page specific on the interactive schedule for our Google site and click on that session evaluation and renewal unit link. Again, reminder, these are specific to each of the sessions. This allows you to not only give us that feedback, but also for you to claim renewal units for each session that you engage with us over the next 2 days. And then if you need help, so any technical assistance, things come up for you. If you only knew what came up for me this morning, but that happens. That's the love of technology, especially during this digital era. So if you do have those kind of challenges, you can use that help desk information that's embedded within the Google site. It's that second one over with the icon here, the little help guy. And what you'll do is you'll submit a ticket. To submit a ticket, however, you need to have your email address inputted. The only reason we need that is just to get you into the system, and that's the only way it's used, so we can connect with you directly. Otherwise, there is no reason for that other than to make sure you can interact with the system, so it creates a temporary account. And we will have support for you throughout the conference, 7:30 to 5:30 each day. And we will also have support through you during our breakout sessions so that we can make sure you maximize your user experience with this virtual conference. Tomorrow, we will have panelists in place for you so you can hear from voices of experience. We have 5 system test coordinators that are going to share with you where they're at as far as planning and working through the state testing and school process details of this year and over the past year. So I just want to take a moment to thank Pam, Jillian, Ryder, Roger, and Susan for graciously offering their willingness to essentially serve on this panel and share with you their experience this year. Our next session will begin at 9:15. We have breaks embedded throughout. We have a networking time from 10 to 15. This will conclude my time with you. I do want to pause, though, to see if there are questions that we need to address before we adjourn in the next 2 minutes. So give me 1 second so I can make sure that any of those are taken care of. All right, and just on my support team, are there any questions that you would like to bring to my attention for us to address right now before we transition over to the next session and break time? All right, well, thank you guys so much for joining us. If there are anything that we need to address later on, we will make sure to do it within our Google site navigation and setup. And thank you again for making this conference possible. We can't wait to connect with you over the next 2 days. You guys take care, and I'll see you at session 1. Bye-bye.